Well, welcome everyone. My name is Jerry Hawkins. I'm the director of Dallas Truth, Racial Healing and Transformation. Our mission is to create a radically inclusive city by addressing race and racism through narrative change, through relationship building, and through equitable policies and practices. I want to welcome everyone to Transformation Tuesday. It's a community-driven online series highlighting the ways race and racism affect every aspect of our lives and what we as a community can do to change and transform it. I'm very excited for this first conversation. Our first panel event will focus on racism and racial equity within the DFW area arts and culture, and will feature leaders from the newly formed Black and Indigenous People of Color Arts Coalition. I am so excited to talk to this group of folks. They are amazing artists. Well, first of all, just amazing people, but amazing artists, amazing creators, amazing leaders in our community. And I want to welcome, our beloved Teresa Coleman-Wash, who is, running Bishop Arts Theater Center. Bishop Arts Theater Center is also part of our Racial Equity Now cohort. I want to welcome Sarah Cardona. She is leading Theatrical Dallas, who does amazing work. Really excited about Cement City and other works. And David Lozano, Carmia Theater. David is co-chair of Dallas Truth, Racial Healing and Transformation, but also a great thought partner. We talk all the time about racial equity, and so really excited to have these conversations. I want to invite them first to introduce themselves a little bit more and tell more about their organization. So we'll start with Teresa. Good morning, Teresa. How are you?
Good morning, Jerry. I'm fine. Thank you so much. I just want to let you know how much I really enjoy these conversations. I always love my time spent with Dallas Truth, Racial Healing and Transformation. It really has been transformational for me. So I am the Executive Artistic Director for the Bishop Arts Theater Center. We are celebrating, the 2020-2021 season will be our 27-year anniversary. We were chartered in Atlanta and moved to Dallas in January of 2000 and had the good fortune of having a 10,000 square foot building donated to our nonprofit in 2005. We raised $500,000 and was able to get a construction loan for about $700,000 and started the renovations on that dilapidated property back in 2006, and it was complete in 2008. So today we produce a full season of theater performances, jazz concerts, speaker series events, and year-round arts education programs.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Sada?
Good morning, Jerry. How are you?
Good morning. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here with this organization. And actually, it's my second time, so I'm enjoying conversations. So I'm the Executive Artistic Director of Teatro Dallas. And Teatro Dallas was founded, as many of you know, by my parents in 1985. So we entered our 35th year last year of producing theater in Dallas. In those 35 years, Teatro Dallas managed two separate buildings. We had one theater on Commerce downtown on the edge of Deep Ellum for about 10 years. And then a second building, a little smaller black box over near the hospital district, edge of design district for about 18 years. So we have managed two facilities, and they served as incubators for many, many arts groups. Especially we had a focus on supporting our groups of color in the city, and to I think success, because over the years many people have come up through the stages, designers, artists, and gone on to found their own theaters both here in Dallas and then also in Los Angeles. We have actors who trained with us, who went on to work in film and television in New York. So I think of Teatro Dallas as, that legacy of really supporting our community through many things, not just through narratives, but also through workforce training in the arts and then advocacy. So very proud to continue that work.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David. Good morning, David. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. My name is David Lozano. I am the Executive Artistic Director of Cardona Theater Company. And Cardona Theater was founded in 1996 as the first Chicano theater company in Dallas. And we've evolved to represent the stories of Latinx people from all over the United States. And since our inception, we've also focused on arts programs for youth. So our professional artists would also create classes, residencies, and workshops for youth all throughout the entire city of Dallas. So that's been the two pillars of our organization for the past 25 years. And about 5 years ago, we began what we call the Community Action Department that was founded and overseen by the great Ernest McMillan. And that is where we intersect the arts with social justice. And so now we're at a moment in which we can reimagine what theater is for us, as we can all imagine and reimagine what the world is because of the pandemic and because of our rebellion against racism at this moment, that we can reimagine what a theater is. And arriving at this time is Virginia Grice, the Academy of Theater's new resident playwright, thanks to a grant from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. And she will be working in Pleasant Grove on a project called The Grove, Un Taller for Dreaming, or a laboratory for dreaming, in which she will reimagine a world without police with a cohort of 7 women and create new work over the course of the next few years.
Thank you all for that. I also want to say that the other member is Soul Rep Theater Company. Soul Rep Theater Company exists to provide quality, transformative Black theater that enlightens the imagination, the spirit, and the soul. Their vision is to shift the paradigm of how the Black experience is valued by the world. We hope to speak to them at a later date, so we appreciate Soul Rep Theater. Soul Rep Theater performed 2 excerpts of their works at our first National Day of Racial Healing, and so we really appreciate Soul Rep as well. So thank you all for that introduction. And in that vein, I really want to start with history, because it's part of our framework of using narrative change and about creating a foundation for this work. When I moved here, obviously the first theater company that's right in this big, large art district is Dallas Theater Center. And so I'm looking for the folks of color who are doing work, because I know it's here somewhere, but our city is not really supporting that. So I want one of you, if you may, what is the history of theater in Dallas? How is Black, Indigenous, Latinx, people of color been treated, underfunded, underrepresented by the city when it comes to art? David, you'll kick us off.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a context, because this is something that we've been talking about, especially within the context of truth, racial healing, and transformation, because we look at the history. So when we think about the first professional theater that became a nonprofit in Dallas, it was the Dallas Theater Center, which was founded in 1959. Now, what was taking place in 1959? We were in the midst of Jim Crow. And there was not going to be a Black nor a brown theater company that was going to thrive at the same financial, at least, level as the Dallas Theater Center. And we have to consider not just theater, but all of the sectors of life. Black and brown people were not able to generate and accumulate wealth during Jim Crow as individuals, as families, as property owners, as business people, much like our white counterparts. Jim Crow was not just suppressing civil and human rights. It was actually keeping our Black and brown people from accumulating wealth. And the flip side of that is that there are beneficiaries of people of this oppression. So that allowed so since there were no Black and brown theater companies able to accumulate wealth, the Dallas Theater Center essentially benefited from that. And over the decades continued to accumulate wealth and continued to build its donor and patron base while we were living through the civil rights era. First, we had to get to the Civil Rights Act. And then we went through the Civil Rights era, and we're still dealing with the repercussions of that, of Jim Crow and that era of oppression, while an organization like the Theater Center is still benefiting from that. And so I think it's really important that when we look at the funding patterns in which our groups are not only historically, but currently underfunded, and groups like the Theater Center are historically and currently overfunded, that is the space in which I think we should talk about racial equity in the arts. So I just wanted to offer that as we begin to talk about our particular groups and POC theaters.
Yeah, and can I build on that, Jerry? In 1965, when the National Endowment for the Arts was starting, Eurocentric arts organizations was able to attract very high-end donors, you know, and which was to the contrary of organizations of color. And so even today, we see that the larger white institutions, like David mentioned, have such a really different economic model than small to mid-sized organizations of color, and organizations of color in general. And that becomes a barrier when attracting board members, because we don't have the name recognition of a Dallas Theater Center. So when people come to move to the city, the first thing you see and hear, even in the media, are the larger institutions. So it becomes a barrier with regards to name recognition, retaining staff members, and also competing for grants. So it's just interesting. When I moved to Dallas in 20 years ago in 2000, and we had the building donated to us, I also saw the Dallas Arts District, or the downtown area. It wasn't necessarily the Dallas Arts District at that time. But when we were renovating our theater, more than 300 families gave $1 million to help build the Dallas Arts District. And so it's interesting that all of the attention, all of the resources, all of everything was directed to that Dallas Arts District. And so we're still feeling the small to mid-sized theater companies are really still feeling the results of having the arts district built, quite frankly.
I can add some context to that, since it's almost like we're tracking historically here, because my parents arrived to Dallas in the early 80s, and they were involved. I guess that time period across the United States was the era of the culture wars, because you did have both in the arts and theater, people really starting to bang on the walls and doors of museums and institutions and asking these questions as to why there was no representation. So my mom arrived from Austin, vis-a-vis from Mexico City. And when she came here as a trained actress, wanted to work and could not find any work where she wasn't a maid or a prostitute or some sort of very stereotype stock character. And this was one of the impetus for founding the theater, was not only to allow actors and directors to be able to experience narratives that spoke of their own experiences and not through the lens of white culture, but also to connect and educate people to this kind of varied experience of Latinx as a network with roots in the Caribbean, with roots in the Middle East, et cetera. Anyhow, that was one of the impetus, but really the problem from the beginning for the theater was in 1985, there was the big five in Dallas, which was the Opera, the Dallas Theater Center, the Symphony, the Science Place, and the DMA. And that was it. And 96.6% of all the funding went to these organizations. About 4% was left over for other groups. And that 4% was in projects. So it was kind of like, as Anika refers to it, crumbs. You got a little funding for a project and hopefully you would just go away and do it. So the beginning of the work that happened in part with Vicki Meek at the South Dallas Cultural Center, when my mom approached her, was to address this issue of no organizational support. Because these other institutions, as David and Teresa are pointing out, historically had endowments, they had cash reserves, they had buildings, they had operational support. But for our organizations, we were just expected to do a one-off project and then go away. So how do you thrive? So they worked together to address the lack of this. And this funding was supposed to come through the public sector. So it just brings us to another thing here is when operational money began to be offered to our groups of color, there was a cap placed on it. And the cap was that you were only able to access a certain amount according to your size, and you could only do that every 2 years. So every year you would get whatever funding level you were at previously 2 years before, which again was just another fetter. It wouldn't allow for growth, and the distribution of public funds, which seems almost ridiculous. You really think about it. We represent a largest portion of the tax base in Dallas, the Black and brown communities. And yet at that, between 1985 and up until very recently, we got the least amount. And which begs the question, why are large organizations that have cash reserves, endowment, building structure, such as the Science Museum, which is now the Perot, they access or operational funds through the city of Dallas. One would ask, the inverse question is, why aren't those groups weaned from the kind of money that is supposed to go from the taxpayers to support other organizations so that they can grow to the same sizes. So there's two things going on here: the lack of structurally, historically, of the access to boards, patrons, donors, etc. But then also the cap on operational support and access to city funds that are still being distributed inequitably.
Thank you all for all of that. That's really great context. I also think about just the history of Dallas, period. Because culture means a way of life, folks have been, since they've been in the city, they've been producing art, they've been producing culture, but it's been terribly undervalued. We did a recent project about 345 and on those three Freedmen's towns, underneath there, and how the city vis-a-vis the state and the federal government ran highways through Black and brown communities and destroyed not only people's houses, but also places of creating art. And I think about why you all had to actually create this. And so tell us more about this coalition, because I know that there's been efforts for solidarity in a lot of different areas. I can recall during Santos Rodriguez's murder, how Black and brown community got together and created what was really like one of the largest demonstrations of solidarity against police violence in downtown Dallas in the 70s. And so I view this as another, not just, coalition, but a protest, right? And so tell us more about why there needs to be a Black and Indigenous People of Color Arts Coalition here in Dallas. David or Teresa.
Well, one, because there's power in concentration. I wrote an essay a couple years ago for HowlRound titled The Ugly Truth About Arts Institutions Led by Women of Color. And at that time, there was a 2016 study that showed that women of color, there were 0 women of color in executive director positions. Executive director positions in LORT theaters, and only 1 woman of color who was an artistic director in LORT theaters. And LORT theaters are typically larger white institutions. And also women who lead nonprofit arts organizations only receive 0.6% of philanthropic dollars. So, what we found was that there is historically, leadership doesn't look like us, certainly doesn't look like me and Sada. And so there was incredible implicit bias. The other thing is there was the impulse to gentrify. So philanthropists were noticing the success of strategies innovated by people of color, but instead of funding our organizations, they funded Eurocentric organizations who kind of got the idea from us. I distinctly remember when we moved into the Bishop Arts District, near the Bishop Arts District, it was not what it is today. And so all the revitalization that's taking place, we knew that, when we would have sold out performances, developers in that area were taking notice. And so, we can, without unequivocally, take note that we helped the revitalization in that area, but we didn't benefit from any of the funding or the attention, the media attention that was directed to that area. Also, philanthropists' eligibility criteria and metrics for impact often reinforce the inequities that are at the core of the very problem that we're trying to solve. And so it's just, we knew early on that we needed to come together. I love being in the room with David Lozano. David Lozano is one of the most brilliant people that I work with, that I know. But I like even more working with the ladies at Soul Rep and also with SATA, because what's happened is we have been pitted against each other. And so in this coalition, we're able to really come together and advocate for each other in ways that we haven't. And I'm a firm believer in you teach people how to treat you. And so it sends a message to everybody who doesn't look like us, that first of all, you can't pit us against each other, and we're not going to allow people to continue to uphold white supremacy culture knowingly. So in my opinion, the BIPOC coalition is actually, it's overdue. And I think that's one of the great things that have come out at this moment, the fact that we have formed alliances and that we've come together in ways that actually nobody could have imagined.
Thank you, Teresa. Anyone wants to add to that?
Yeah, I would add, I completely agree with what Teresa's saying. We're also, learning strategies from one another. I am lucky to be given this legacy that my mother really built up, but she's the one who suffered a lot of the discrimination for more than 25 years. And she had an accent, and so even walking in to speak to funders, there was a block. So I know I saw her go through that. But I want to say that from the beginning, the person that helped her, and she in turn helped in return was Vicky Meek at the South Dallas Cultural Center. Together, they made a lot of inroads, and I have seen this over and over again in different ways. But Teresa's correct. We have, because of the structural racism in past, fear has prevented our communities from coming together, fear of losing the little bit of funding that you might have, fear of rocking the boat, so to speak. So on some occasions in the past, because of the way that racism works, in fact, we've damaged, those communities have inadvertently had damaged one another's opportunities simply because of fear of the power structure, of losing out. And I think what is long overdue is this sense of coming together to overcome that fear, to know that there may be, risk at hand, but the risk is mitigated by being stronger together and by advocating for one another. And we all, once you get in the room, you realize we're all facing the same things: lack of endowment, lack of cash reserves, lack of operational, lack of staff, lack of health insurance. So we are reaching out with our coalition to really query our community and try to understand, where they are, what are the things that they need, because we want to make sure that not just our 4 groups, but other artists in the community realize that we're listening and we're watching and we're wanting them to know that there's a sense of support amongst our groups to advocate for each other, because the end goal is really to bring the tide up for all of us.
Yeah, thank you, David.
So I'd like to talk about, can you hear me? Yeah, okay. So I'd like to talk about the moment we began to organize. The thing is, we've always been in touch with each other, and as executives within our companies, we're in a lot of coalitions all over the city. And we never use this term, but in those spaces, we are the minority. We are not the minority in Dallas. We are the majority of Dallas when we look at BIPOC communities. But I want us to think about the context in which this coalition began. We had been sheltered in for about a month, and then we witnessed the execution of George Floyd. And we witnessed the uprising of the American people throughout the nation and throughout the world. We saw the Minneapolis police station go up in flames. Our country was living in a space that was beyond simply logic and policy and structural thought. We were living in a place in which we were seeing Americans putting their bodies on the line for the liberation and protection of Black bodies. And we are living this through our screens. And as a country, we're experiencing this. And as artists, we're experiencing this. And then when we get to Friday night and the President of the United States is talking about spraying bullets on Americans, there's something that just calibrated inside of me at that moment. And at that moment, it said to me that we cannot be silent, because this sort of violence on Black and Brown and Indigenous and POC bodies is state sanctioned. And it's time for us to speak the truth to that. And as an executive, so here I am processing all of this. This is beyond my scope as an executive artistic director on one hand, on an operational level, but as an interpreter of the world for the sake of expressing and communicating through the arts with my community, this was passing through me. And the following week, we're going to these coalition meetings in which there may be 3 people of color to 30 white folks. And it became so clear that our needs had not and were not being listened to. And it occurred to me that I was sleepwalking. through these coalitions. I basically closed my gaze, shut my gaze, waited through these meetings because I felt I needed to, but I was not being heard, and I was playing along with it. That week, I said to myself, no more. And so I ended up leaving 2 coalitions that week that were working towards theaters and reopening in the arts, because my voice didn't count. And I specifically wanted to talk about racial equity, and I was railroaded. So the coalition is so important right now, because what's key for us is that we speak when we see injustice, and that we point out when there is racial inequity taking place, because if we don't, we enable it. And as Sada was referring to, that many of our historical Black and brown companies didn't speak up when we needed to, because we were afraid of repercussions and retribution, because there is still resistance to true racial equity. I'm going to make a few examples and I'll wrap up, but let's think about this. Academy of Theater, our dates were being cut regularly at the Latino Cultural Center. We were presenting full seasons. We had become the largest Latinx theater company in Texas. However, management wanted to cut our dates over and over, and we were fighting that struggle for 3 years. Teatro Dallas struggled with the Latino Cultural Center. Soul Rep struggled at the South Dallas Cultural Center without having proper amount of time for rehearsal and production. These are 2 essential things that we have to look at and let our common sense tell us this is not fair. And let me add one other thing. In 2016, the AT&T Performing Arts Center received a $15 million bailout to pay off their debt. Now, that wasn't allowed in the cultural policy, so the city council and the Office of Arts and Culture, they decided to create a services contract for marketing, in which they could pay the AT&T Performing Arts Center, funnel the money through the contract to pay off their debt. So compare the way that our 3 groups are treated at city cultural centers and how the city dropped $15 million for debt it wasn't allowed to do. Oh, and we can't forget, Teresa's Bishop Arts Theater Center owes $500,000 on its building, and yet she has to pay out her bill. So it's important for us to use our common sense when looking at the numbers, looking at practice, and having to call it out, because otherwise we're going to be doing this forever. And so this coalition is meant to truly be transparent and clear about practice.
Thank you all for that. That's like really great context. I see that Tanya Holloway has joined us. When she's ready, I would love for her to also introduce herself and tell us a little bit about Soul Rep. Thank you for being here with us, Tanya.
Just now getting on, I had an engagement this morning. Actually, my husband is having surgery, so I was dealing with that as we speak. And Gwina was supposed to sit in, but she was called into a work meeting. So luckily I came home right in time, and here I am. Again, I am co-founder and co-artistic director of Soul Rep Theater. And we have been around since 1996. We are celebrating our 25th anniversary this year. And we are looking for a home. And we've been doing that for quite some time. We took a hiatus mid 2000s, early part of 2000. And since we've been back full stride, we've been, that's one of our main goals, is to find a home and also to have a full-time staff. Our home has been at the South Dallas Cultural Center, and over the years, we've been grateful for that because that's where we got our footing, that's where we got our start. But it just started becoming, which we're not sure as to how that all manifested, it started becoming difficult for us to produce quality theater with the rehearsal restrictions, limited space to not only do our shows or the times that we can do our shows, but where we could rehearse. At one time we were rehearsing in the kitchen. So, and we, despite the setbacks, we have managed to still continue to grow our company and strive in Dallas and reach new audiences and continue to do arts education in the schools and outside of the schools wherever we can. But it's been hard. We have received grants from the city, but they've been like, you know, where we're appreciative of those grants, I have to admit, it's just been pennies as compared to the money that our counter companies or our, you know, other companies in Dallas get. And I'm not just talking about the big houses. I'm talking about houses that are, you know, not that much bigger than ours. We all have are educated in the field of what we do in our arts, higher degrees in that field. And we're looking to really be known more. I think we are, but we still we're under the shadow of community theater. And I think that's because we are limited in how big we can really grow in our capabilities because of the lack of resources that are funneled to us, as well as our the other theaters, Teatro Dallas, Cardona, and Bishop Arts, just limited resources. And we're constantly every year looking at the price tag of what's given to a Wiley or an AT&T or DTC. And it's like, we feel like we're an afterthought. And and I say we, meaning everybody on this Zoom, we are the substitute for going into those schools, reaching those areas of Dallas that don't always have the arts at their fingertips or quality arts at their fingertips. We do that grunge work. We're on the front lines going in and picking up the mantle of what the city of Dallas may not always be able to do, be it lack of manpower or resources, or just overlooking those schools or those communities because they're just low on the list. We go in and make sure that they're not forgotten and the arts are not forgotten in those communities. So for that, I think we should be lifted up just as much as any other the union houses or the bigger theaters here in Dallas, because we are essential. We are essential. A lot of times our kids can't go to the education or the arts program at those bigger facilities. They can't afford those summer programs. And so, Reb, I know if we're not doing it for free, we're pretty much, if we put a price tag on it, it's pretty, you know, you might as well say it's free, because we know that those kids are forgotten in what they can do. I mean, you know, and what they can afford. And we don't skimp on just because they can't pay on the quality of education, arts education that they receive. So I just think it's, you know, in the wake of this powerful movement within our country, I think it's really for Dallas time to recognize what all we do and how essential we are to those areas that they can't always reach or don't always know what's going on because they're not in the area, you know.
No, thank you, Tanya. That's great context. And I want to give some more context as I found this 2016 article. Sada mentioned the Big Five, so I want to give some context for you know, folks. So Dallas Opera, they have from this 2016 article has 61 board members. 95% of them were white. 5% were non-white. They had an annual budget of $18.2 million and an endowment of $27.8 million. Dallas Theater Center had 66 board members at this time. This is 4 years ago. Diversity was 90% white, 10% non-white, had an annual budget of $10 million and an endowment of $6 million. Dallas Symphony Orchestra had 68 board members, 90% were white, 10% non-white, had an annual budget of $36.2 million, an endowment of $121 million. Dallas Museum of Art, 73 board members, 86% not white, 14% non-white, annual budget of $22 million, endowment of $188 million. So just to give like a context of what we're talking about and why we're here having this conversation, and knowing that those are, this is 4 years ago resources, right? I want you all to describe what is it going to take to change this, right? Like, what describe first, like the healing, the transformation, and really the repair, like the reparations is going to need to happen in order to have equitable arts and culture environment in this city.
I can start. I would say one thing is that we are, I think we're kind of made to be outlaws, because we are, we're talking, for example, me bringing up these clear inequities in which BIPOC groups are treated and our arts district groups are treated, especially in terms of space. And for saying that, I may be treated as an outlaw and in the next meeting with other people or in discussions like this. And what does that parallel? What does that parallel? That parallels the way that our city is policed. So are we the outlaws of this city, or do we belong in this city? So I think that that's a big step that we need to take if we're going to start healing, is that I feel that it's important for us to be listened to. And I don't think that we are. And I think that we realized that after the protests, and I think that we came in with clear eyes into these coalitions and white dominant spaces, that our needs were not important or listened to. And so there's no way for us to achieve racial equity in the arts as a city if we're not even listened to. And it seems like the processes are always hemming and hawing. Let's just look online to definitions of racial equity. 98% of these definitions are flawed. And I imagine because people are afraid to actually define what racial equity means, which is ultimately providing more funding to those who have been historically underfunded. And I think communities are afraid of that. I think Dallas is afraid of that. So what's going to be important is for us to truly be able to speak without being villainized, and to be heard. And if racial equity is a reality, we should follow the paths of true racial equity instead of trying to, for example, what's been happening recently is there's a new term, Alana, instead of BIPOC, that is being used in our cities now. And people are talking about how do we include organizations like the Crow Collection of Asian Art into Alana. So for us, racial equity is about bring more resources to those of us who've been historically underfunded. The Crow Collection has not been historically underfunded. In fact, they benefited. So we're having to fight these kind of battles. It's like these smaller battles instead of taking that full steps towards true racial equity, because I feel that non-BIPOC groups feel that they are going to lose something because of it. So we have to have a real conversation about this rather than the soundbite culture, rather than even the committee culture that just lets someone speak and move on. We've got to find ways to have true convenings around this and leave those meetings with decisions and be accountable to them.
I want to piggyback that. Yes, the city of Dallas has a lot of, I've gone to several seminars and workshops on racial equity and all of that. And it's a lot of talk. It's been a lot of talk over the years. And it feels like once I leave those meetings, it's like, okay, we had a great discussion, but you know, we're still in the same boat. So I didn't hear any solutions. I didn't hear any kind of active or mobile activity that the city of Dallas is going to do now that they've heard everybody's gripes, so to speak, in the session. It's a lot of talk, but now it's really time to mobilize all of what those meetings were supposed to stand for, which is equity.
I'd like to address one of the things that happens in this city, which is the difference between, say, for example, a plan and a policy, an enforcement of a policy, because policies are there, you know, across government to try to change things. And we see the same thing with discussions about recommendations for the DPD. And until you move money out of one place and put it somewhere else, you know, we're not really getting to the root of what you're talking about, which is parity, which is redistribution and allocation of resources to the people who are doing work. And so having all these cloaked terms that allow for, there's a difference between diversity and inclusion and racial equity and transformation. We're mission-driven groups. We are by and for, so we're led by you know, individuals of color. We're here to serve our communities. You know, simply putting a few people on a board, diversifying a board, or including some artists on your stages. This is a conversation that's happening across the United States, not just in Dallas, because it is the de facto go-to solution through all this DEI work that has happened. And like Tanya's saying, we've all left meetings where we saw, you know, an organization probably spend $10,000 on a large luncheon to diversify their white board. And we're like, you know, why don't you just give it to us and we'll go out and do some great work. And that's really what it comes to, is redistribution and allocation of funds, and a distinction between having a plan and a policy. Because when David referred to that $15 million bailout, that was a violation in a way of a policy. Back when you were talking about 2016, when you had all these boards that were 90% white, at the same time, the then Office of Cultural Affairs, we all who went through COP had to show that we were diversifying our board because it was part of our COP allocations. And yet at the same time, there were other organizations that were getting money that never did that. So unless we have accountability and actually put tooth to our policies, they are meaningless. And so really, I think that is a huge issue that happens in this city, is over and over and over again, we have these things that cloak the true redistribution of funds. And again, to my point about weaning large organizations that have deep pockets, that have all of those endowments and cash reserves that you're talking about from city funds, we have to ask that question as to why. And really at the heart of this, you know, again, that we don't want to really discuss, but that has been alluded to by Teresa with development in Bishop Arts, the development of the Arts District, is that the arts are handmaiden and in service to things like development, buildings. We're, you know, the interesting thing about being in this pandemic, this city is has such a building culture. It is so focused on having beautiful buildings, and it is gorgeous. I, you know, walk over that Trinity River Bridge all the time and think like, wow, what a beautiful city. It is physically a beautiful city, but physical isn't really where the spirit and the heart is. And right now, when everything is shuttered, what people need is they need mental stimulation, they need cultural stimulation, and it's not going to happen in buildings anytime soon. So I think that there's a lot of lessons here to be learned, but wouldn't kid ourselves to think that the arts aren't part of a mechanism for development, for many other things in which we have been utilized as a tool. So, you know, Teatro Dallas had a space for 10 years at the edge of Deep Ellum, and we were burned out. The building caught fire. It burned in the middle of the night. No one could ever explain why. But guess what? We lost our lease, and that building became, condo office spaces. So then we moved to another part of town in which over and over again, we asked for the city to support us as we incubated other groups. It was very, very difficult to do this. With the Oak Cliff Cultural Center, at one time I used to work for the Office of Cultural Affairs. I led the Latino Arts Initiative with Yolanda Alameda. We had to do all kinds of shenanigans in Oak Cliff to lease the Ice House in order to produce a little bit of art and support our artists there, which eventually became the Oak Cliff Cultural Center. But it just spoke to the lack of commitment from the very beginning of saying, hey, you know what? There's already artists here. Why don't we help them build a building and let them do what they do best? So I just think that historically we've been leveraged. We're seeing this right now with Recipe out in, the border of Oak Cliff, South Dallas. They're the first ones to go out there. They're trying to get some support. They don't get support. Right across the street, some big organization comes in, religious organization. There have been artists who wanted to buy that building for a long time. It's not like we haven't had these discussions. We are embedded in communities deeply and over a long period of time. And yet we're not rewarded for that, other than to say thank you for making the conditions best for a developer to come in. So I just think parity really is about acknowledgement of resources. And then if you're going to have a policy that it's really has tooth to it and it's not continuously violated.
Yeah, can I say this, Jerry? There definitely needs to be equity and distribution. We need to move also from equity, diversity, inclusion to anti-racism, quite frankly, because we've all been, as Tanya said, in those meetings that are really lip service for political correctness. I distinctly remember when we were renovating the Bishop Arts District, the Dallas Arts District was being built, and more than 300 families, 330 to be exact, gave $1 million to build the the Dallas Arts District. And the Bishop Arts District, there were a lot of, received a lot of support also. I think what's really telling in this time is that when you look at the work that's being done, to Tanya's point, 45 million people are unemployed. 27 million people are don't have insurance. Parents are so ill-equipped when it comes to homeschooling their children. Bishop Arts Theater, and I know Teatro Dallas and Soul Rep and Cardona, we are incredibly busy right now. Nonprofits exist to serve their communities. And so I think that there has to be a value system. Our values have to change. We are on the front lines working with school districts, aging facilities, donating. We certainly don't have project support or project funding for the projects that's happening right now. We're doing it because our community needs us. And I think it's very telling that these larger white institutions have closed their doors and are waiting for, to get back to business as usual when our communities are in dire straits. So there has to be a value system. We have to be rewarded for the work that we're doing, and we have to be supported for the work that we're doing. More than anything, we've got to understand, I think that the citizens of Dallas need to take notice of who is really working with school districts and being a resource to the institutions of Dallas in this moment.
Those are all really important points. I don't even know even if we should expound on that, because you all said it so perfectly. I had one more question for you, but I have to talk about the art. So I have to add this extra question because, you know, Teresa said it really well, is that, you know, you all are creators and, you know, interpreters of this culture, but also you all are doing community work, right? While you all are doing this, particularly because, not only because you have to, because you live in communities of color that are already dealing with so many things, but you all are still producing art. So as a person who has experienced art from all of you all in your work, you know, and I think about, you know, experiencing Loving and doing talkbacks on the stage at Bishop Arts Theater Center, and you know, reading about Jane Elkins that Soul Rep produced, and Soul Rep did an excerpt of Freemanstown on our stage at the National Day of Racial Healing. You know, thinking about, you know, Cement City. I was so excited to go see it in person. I still have these tickets right here on my dresser. So, you know, and, you know, Where Earth Meets the Sky, which is one of my favorite from Cardona Theater, and doing talkbacks for Wet, a documented journey. You all are not just producing art, right? As theater groups of color, you all are like speaking to history and also speaking to like modern day issues of race and racism. Can you all tell us just a little bit about the art that you all are producing, have produced, and are producing in the future? Because I think we have to talk about the art. And we can start with Sada this time.
Sure, Jerry. Well, Teatro Dallas, I guess if you want to say thematically, we've been very involved with bringing international art to Dallas and really kind of expanding the lens of Latinx. So we just recently became part of something called REI, which is Redes Escénicas Ibéricas, which is just a network of international Latin American theaters that happened in the last month. So really excited about that because it's going to enable us to bring artists from places like Brazil, Colombia, Venezuela to Dallas to work with actors. That's coming up in the future. But in the past, historically, the other way we've worked is because we're here and we acknowledge that all the rich texture of the stories here. Teatro was the first group really to address the death of Santos Rodriguez so many years ago. We did research. Our work is very meticulous, research-based. We did interviews with the family. All of that we've contributed to the MAL, Mexican American Historical League, hours of footage with Bessie and David and their family. We staged that play twice. I would really, honestly, without exaggeration, say it was a very cathartic moment for our Latino community in Dallas to have that staged, because it represented one of the first moments in which a story that was embedded psychically in our city's DNA was opened up and is shared communally, and people came back and came back and came back, and it was a very powerful story. We have done stories about Little Mexico, and then of course recently Cement City, which is a very, very powerful story because at its heart, it addresses all these things, which, you know, environmental racism in West Dallas with the cement factories. You know, it's a story about Mexican families that were brought here to work in the cement factories and labored under their shadows, but also the resiliency of that community. That community in those days, it was so far out. Ledbetter was so far away from everything else that actually there was a lot of interaction between the Indian community that lived off the Trinity River that was still there, and early Mexican families and Black families that lived there too, all of them segregated. But then additionally, those families over the years, as they grew, the cement companies gave them a plot of land that was you know, their Campo Santo, where they could bury their dead. That was reclaimed in ways that are a lot like Freedman's Cemetery. So there, to this date, there are hundreds of bodies that are not accounted for, that are probably under the adjacent parking lot at Pinnacle Park from Lowe's all the way to right beneath the AT&T call center there. And in fact, in order to get into the cemetery, you have to get access from AT&T. So it's a really interesting way in which the corporation controls the dead of our community. Today, if you want to go, you have to get buzzed in. It is a Byzantine sort of process. It's not easy. You don't have access to it. And I can just tell you, for the Latino community, there's nothing more powerful. And of course, for the Black community too, that connectivity with your ancestors. Because if you are cut off from your root, you're a plant that will shrivel and die. And so there's been this ongoing battle from the Ledbetter Association there to be able to do the kind of research that would take to find out what happened to those bodies, to reclaim that cemetery for the community. And so when we really did the research in this story, what was most powerful, though there's all this historical thing, as a theater company, we go to the heart of sort of the imagery, because art making is, it's the lie that tells the truth. So we looked for the universal things here too. And we found all kinds of beautiful imagery, which is, here you have a telecommunication company cutting off communication between the living and the dead. So there's all kinds of powerful images. And that play, unfortunately, we weren't able to share some of the things we did, but we brought in a young playwright to workshop. So our process as a theater company is not just, in some ways, Cora really embodied this, the founder. She is a staunch socialist and anti-capitalist, and she really embraces this kind of style in Latin American theater that is based on ritual, that you don't just come in with a text. A story doesn't come from language. It comes you embody it. Your body carries the story. And especially when we talk about trauma, as you guys are dealing with trauma and healing, we begin with the bodies. And so, to work over time with enough time to really explore this story, to work with the community, to bring the community in to tell the story, because it's not just about us representing people. We actually had people like Victoria Farrell Ortiz, who was part of our play. We had other artists, Angela Faz, who lives in the community, working on the sets. We're bringing in people from the community to be collaborators in our art making process. And this is a new direction I want to take our theater. And we started a collab series, which is to get out into the community, to have, for example, we had a workshop where we had high school students do a jam session with an electronica artist, and we're going to use that music as a soundscape for another play. We want our community to collaborate with us. And I think this is very distinct from the way theaters that aren't working with and for community, I don't think they have the same kind of considerations. And so I'm very proud of that work, and we hope to revive it at some point, but it needs to be done the right way. It's not a work that can be live streamed. It would really not do it service, because the audience needs to complete the catharsis there.
No, that's great. Thank you so much for that. I look forward to seeing it on stage one day. Anyone else want to share some art? Because I'm really a fan of all of you all's work.
I'll share, Jerry. Property ownership has been a game changer for us. And early on, when we finished the renovations of the building, we met with the community and asked, what are we doing that you'd like to see us do more of, and what are we not doing that you'd like to see us implement? And what we learned was that parents wanted somewhere for their kids to be during the after school hours in the summer months. Our patrons wanted a jazz series, and artists wanted to be able to hone their craft. So we started producing a full season of theater performances, jazz concerts, speaker series, events, and year-round arts education programs. And when the pandemic hit, we had senior citizens who were coming to the building like twice a week to participate in a storytelling circle. And when we were mandated to shelter in place, we were not going to abandon those seniors. So we started to doing patio live events in the parking lots and patios of aging facilities. And again, we didn't have funding for that, but I was not going to abandon those senior citizens. So our programming really looks different from one week to the next because, again, we are meeting the needs of the community. But prior to COVID, I attended the Dramatists Guild convention in San Jose. I think it was in 2015. And what I learned was that performances that were produced by that women only arts organizations only produced about I think it was like 19% of plays that are written by women. And I was so embarrassed to learn that because I felt like I had a responsibility to know that information. Well, once I learned it, of course, we started intentionally coming back to the theater, and we kind of morphed into this really social justice organization where we were producing plays like The Face of Emmett Till, written by Mamie Till Mobley, co-written by Mamie Till Mobley, In the Tall Grass, about the death of transgender woman Shuler Shade. This happened in the medical district. Nobody was talking about it. Even Loving and Loving, the show that we produced just before the theater, the pandemic hit, where we really center women of color, particularly women of color. And so I'm really excited about continuing that work. The great thing about this moment is that it's opened up an opportunity for us to work with artists all over the country. And so that is, that's coming up. I'm working with some artists out of Pittsburgh on a monologue competition that's coming up. I have some colleagues that I'm working with with the Dramatists Guild. So I'm really excited about that. But more than anything else, this is a time for us to innovate in real time. And again, I'm just excited about the future because we are thinking about theater, like David said before, in ways that we never have before, and we're testing the waters, particularly with technology.
David, Tanya. David.
So what we've been we've been the pandemic really brought everything to a grinding halt, and like other theater companies, it's like our not infrastructure, but the operational structures just came tumbling down, and we had to rebuild. And one of the things that our resident playwright, Virginia Grice, continually says, she says that this moment is a portal, and we have an opportunity to walk through it and discover where we can be on the other side. And so, and it's been a great encounter between Vicki and our company. Right after the pandemic, we began arts and healing online courses. Now, what's become interesting about that moving forward is that we're exploring what that looks like in performance. So what does it mean, even without actors as performers, but people walking through a space in which they are immersed in the arts and healing experience, as opposed to just experiencing it in one's home on the computer.
David, can you mention some of those folks who were part of that, because they're community members also? So
absolutely, we had a phenomenal course. Stephanie Tovar led a class called Stories That Heal, in which artists and non-artists were able to bring a work of art and share it with the group, and share a little bit of how that work of art is a process of healing for them, or a means of finding purpose or fulfillment. And it's an extraordinary experience to share on that depth, because from the first person that shares their very personal and closely held work of art, you're communicating with someone from the gut level and from a level that's not judgmental and logical. And so even though we were online, we connected very deeply. And I think Stephanie has just great talents as a leader and a healer, that she was able to guide us through that. And then Ernest McMillan curated a series, A Light Unto Yourself and Others, which included Evelio Flores, who led a course on In Lakesh, I Am Your Other You. And we also had Akweti, who talked about Pan-African solidarity and what that means in our communities here in the United States, and how those are systems that our community support at this time. We also had a incredible professor from the Divinity School from SMU, which he taught a course on agape, Ruben Hibut, and he led us through an incredible meditation course that simply asked us to look at images, to breathe them in and breathe them out. And he said, our world is saying we cannot breathe. And he pointed to the environment. He pointed to the patients in the hospitals, and he pointed us to George Floyd. And we were breathing in the world around us, and it was extraordinary. And so the question is, how does that become a performance experience in which a person is actually in a performance hall standing, and we are projecting this session on a sculptor, and we're working with Andrew Scott, who a Black sculptor out of UTD, who has designed sculpture for Wynton Marsalis in his recent tour, and to help us create an embodied and immersive experience like this. And so these are the explorations that we're so excited about, that would not be part of a season of plays. But since we don't know if actors are going to be able to rehearse together close by, does it make sense to pull the actor out and allow the participant to be the embodied actor moving through the spaces and experiencing this? So we're exploring all kinds of things. I'm excited about our co-pros with Soul Rep. We're looking at an audio play by Dale Orlander Smith about a Native American man at Tlingit, as well as a Lakota, part Tlingit from Alaska and part Lakota, who marries an African American woman, and they have a child. And we're looking at an audio play, which will be very exciting. And we're looking at a new work in progress with Teatro Dallas that we would perform outdoors and socially distanced, and still exploring form. And I think that what's exciting for me as an artist is that I'm able to actually depart from structures of thinking in theater and look at visual art, installation art, and how those art movements, sculpture, how those art movements are actually interactive. And you can really see that in some of this work. And so I'm curious to see where these experiments take us.
No, I really experienced that with Virginia, her experience of that manifesto being played out. And we actually were on the stage with the actors, and we actually experienced things that were talked about in the play, like the bone soup and things like that. So I really appreciate that. Tanya, with Soul Rep? Yes, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to add, I'm sorry. We have Vicky is actually developing her first performance, which will go online August 1st and 2nd. There will be English performances and Spanish performances, A Farm for Meme. And it is a short story about the post-1992 rebellions in Los Angeles, in which a community of Black and Brown people developed a community farm on a 14-acre plot of land. And Vicky says that this project is going to be the seeds for her 3-year residency. So Vicky speaks poetry as she organizes the logistics of her projects. And that's a very important project for us this weekend, and it's free. So we ask people to go to our website and look it up.
That's awesome. Tanya?
That's awesome. Okay, so as David said, our first production together is with Cardona. It is a part of our Cafe Negro series. And that started 90s, right? Late 90s. David, when did we start the Cafe?
It was the early 90s.
It was the early 90s?
Yeah,
Okay.
it was early 90s.
Early 90s, we started the Cafe Negro series where the two theaters partnered up and do a production together. And so as he mentioned, that's My Red Hand, My Black Hand. I'm very excited about that because it's a little bit of my family history with the Native American community and my grandfather. So that is on the horizons. We're also working, our next production after that is going to be a partnership with Booker T. We do a lot of work because Gwina works at, the theater arts, she's over the theater arts program at Booker T. And so we do a lot of in-house work with them. But one of the things that is on our agenda is a show dealing with the Augusta Boal technique. We explored, he's the father of Theater of the Oppressed, which is taking any kind of issues, political issues, whatever is affecting that community as far as governmental restrictions or things that are clashing with that community. He invented this form of art or theater where it forces not just the actors, but the audience to really take different views, physical views of one incident. So for example, if you take the Floyd incident and he reenacts that, the audience is looking at it from, 4 or 5 different views, physical views of that reenactment. And it's all about perception. And from my view, I see this story. From my view, I see this story, and how we have all these different stories and everybody is right. But it's okay, how do we then take all our different opinions, our views based off of the angle in which we're looking at the same problem and bring that together to make an effective change? And so that is one of the things that the Boal technique explores. And we're going to do that with our kids, because we know that in this time it's the kids as well as us, but it is the kids on the front line. And often they feel like, I don't have a voice in this, or I want to say something, but I don't know how to say, and does my voice really make a difference? And through this technique, it is teaching them an effective way to use their voice productively, not only through this partnership, but garner these techniques to use out in the world when they become adults. So we've done it before. Year before last, we did 2 years ago, I should say, we did our new play festival using the Boal technique. And we literally, and also one of the main components of it is that the audience are spect actors. They're not spectators, they're spect actors. So whether they realize it that or not, or we kind of give somebody a heads up beforehand, which we've done when we did it for the new play festival, they are a part of the scene. I never forget one particular piece that was being performed in the festival, and the table was set up to where it kind of met the person on that particular side is almost sitting at the table themselves. That's where their audience seat was. And when the actors came and started performing a scene at the dinner table, the people were there like, we're actually in this scene, but it didn't interrupt the flow or anything. And it was really neat. So we're excited to teach that. And we're going to do a behind the scenes videography of that whole session of how we work with the kids in rehearsal, and of course, rehearsal is on Zoom part of the time, but how just the behind the scenes of the making of this project with these kids. So it is used as a tool for if we go into schools or anyone else wants to use it at their schools, they have something visually to use as a training tool. Then our next thing I'm very proud of is Anika Macmillan. She is a wonderful writer, and she has been commissioned to write the play Do No Harm, which is based off of James Madison Sims. He is known as the father of gynecology, but a lot of people do not know that he used women, Black women who were slaves, as his guinea pigs, and without anesthesia, without any kind of sedative to knock them out while he's performing these horrific procedures on them, they were wide awake. And so it was at the expense of Black women do we now know all about, you know, gynecology and the woman's body and so forth. And so we were going to do this last year, but of course, Miss Rona came in and interrupted everything. So we are partnering with the Heritage Village, and they have allowed us, or they want to work with us to not only, we're going to be on location and film that play in one of their cabins. And that is this fall. So that's that aspect of So Rep that we've explored it before, but we really want, COVID has given us the opportunity to really explore the film side, media side of the company. And so we're going to film it on location. And we're going to have a future a meeting this week with a representative from Heritage Village to possibly do Freedman performances out in that area as a tourist attraction for Dallas, for not only the city of Dallas, people living here to learn about the Freedman Cemetery, but any tourists. So
we partnered with them on a project called the Slave Dwelling Project last year. So that's going to be amazing. We have a couple of minutes. So I really want to just, give everybody at least 30 seconds to talk about how, we can support the Black and Indigenous People of Color Arts Coalition, particularly because I think about my experience. At the age of 37, 38, I got my first membership to a museum, and it's the Modern Museum in Fort Worth. And it's only because I was in there, and I only went there because they had artists of color there. You know, I could have went to the DMA, but DMA didn't really have people that looked like me in the walls, right? I went to a Kehinde Wiley exhibit at the Fort Worth Modern, and I went there to buy this Kehinde Wiley postcard, and somebody said, "Do you have a membership? Are you buying this? Or you got a discount?" And that was the first time someone asked me to buy membership to a museum, And I think about all the museums I've been to. I've actually been trained in a museum. I was a student at the School of Arts Institute of Chicago. And I'm just thinking about all of these times I never been asked. And I was like, yeah, I will buy membership. And I bought this membership, and it's reciprocal. I can go any museum in the country, you know what I mean? And it's great. And I was like, wow. And so I want to be the first patron of the BIPOC Arts Collaborative season ticket holder. So whenever you all do that, I want to be 0001. So I want to buy the first season ticket holder to your collaboration. So whenever you are ready for that, I'm ready. But how can we support each one of your organizations? We'll start with you, Teresa.
Well, I just want to say that we can't professionalize racial equity. It's very personal. And I think early after the Black Lives Matter movement, we saw these lofty statements of solidarity, but we're not looking for that. We're looking for real transformative change, and that happens personally within. And I think that what folks need to know is that this is a marathon. It's definitely not a sprint. We've got to continue to work at racial equity, and we really do have to move away from equity, diversity, and inclusion, because like David said, we have been invited to those rooms, but because you invite me does not mean that you're hearing and centering my voice, or that I have agency in those organizations. And that's where we have to start. Before I pass the mic, I was very remiss and I did not mention our 2 jazz concerts that are coming up. I gotta do that. We've partnered with the Dallas Zoo on October 10th. So Everett Harp and Tim Bowman will be performing there. And then we have Kirk Whalum and Alex Bouillon at Lone Star Park. It's a social distancing drive-in concert. We're really excited about that.
Awesome, thank you. And where can we find Bishop Arts Theater Center's information? Where can we find you all?
On our website. The website is bishopartstheater.org, theater with an R-E.
Thank you. We'll go to Asada.
Yeah, Jerry, this has been a great conversation. You know, our coalition is here to support other artists. As you can see, we've all collaborated together. And I think an interesting thing that's being pulled out thematically is that we're tapping into this very old tradition of theater that is embedded in all of our communities and our communities historically, which is that it's a forum, it's an open and safe space for us to intersect and address issues socially. We've been hosting platforms, so I want to continue to, you know, shout out to people that by being active, you know, by putting the emphasis on small but incremental steps towards activism, which in our case, we just need public support. And that comes in a variety of different ways, from everything from advocating for our work through City Hall and government. And we have ways to do that are, a lot of it's housed on our independent websites, but also Karamia's got a great platform on Facebook with all of our past videos that we've hosted, from everything from housing, issues of housing, to issues related to the arts intersecting with discussions about police funding. And so I think by you know, supporting our work by advocating for us, but then all of us, as we move through this difficult time, I think it's clear that we're all offering services to our community free. Teatro Dallas is about to launch on the beginning of August. It's a brand new website. We will be housing all of we've produced an audio play, a short documentary, a new youth program that are all video streaming. We're about to start our new Poem Bomb campaign, so y'all be looking out for that. But we just take donations, and I think it's really important to continue to support our artists. So we are, you know, we continue to pay all of our artists for this work. And so the public that when they can, I think, you know, if they can continue to support us, it goes directly to our artists. And I really want to emphasize that. Whatever it is that you're accessing content wise, I think in our communities, you know, it's important to make things accessible, and we do a lot of work for free. But I also feel like there's an education process where we need to educate our own communities about the value of things, because they will often go and spend money on something else. And for some reason, the arts are sort of like, oh, you know, oh, I don't want to spend that much money on that. And it's work to do that. But I think it's important for our communities to support us back. So I am going to just say, when you can, as you're saying, you know, buy a membership, buy a ticket, make a donation, and then advocate for us with our government, our city council.
Thank you. Where can we find more information about you all?
On our website, and our new website will be launching next week. So we'll be sending something out on that. You can subscribe directly on there. Once you subscribe, then you get into our constant contact, and then we will poem bomb you.
David?
Yes, we, like Jerry, we ask people to become our season pass holders. And so we hope to announce our very unorthodox season, but exciting and accessible season coming up that we'll announce probably in four to 5 weeks. So please become a season pass holder. Also, feel free to make a contribution. Again, all of our funding will go towards the payment of artists. and that is key for this this next fiscal year. And I would say for the BIPOC Arts Coalition, what's really important here is that we propagate the narratives that we've been speaking, so that what we've said today does not just stay here and live on a video that will be stored on YouTube, but how do these narratives actually become repeated and propagated? Because that's the only way that these narratives will no longer be outliers, because I think that's what we're struggling with. And so we're living in a moment in which the anti-racism is essentially a battle of narratives at this moment. And it eventually it needs to get to the battle of policy and resources, but we must win the narrative. So I want people to keep telling this story and to call out these inequities that are really common sense inequities. Look where the money goes, look where the resources are, and look how people are treated. Again, when we look at the prison and the policing systems, who's going to our jails, who's staying the longest, and under what so-called crimes. Again, we're going to see the inequities in all of these systems. So we need to propagate the narratives. And I would suggest that going to our website, cardonamiatheater.org, where we house all of our programming, opportunities for donations, season passes, as well as information on the coalition.
Thank you, David. Tanya?
I'll tell you right off the bat, sorep.org. Sorep, and that's theater with no, you don't have to worry about theater, that's my Gmail. But sorep.org. I love BIPOC that we've gotten together to strengthen our individual theaters and endeavors. Their strength in numbers, but I don't want, what we're also looking for, what I don't want it to be just us against the city. I want eventually, as Teresa said, it's going to be a marathon, but eventually that we are a collective force, BIPOC, with the city of Dallas in spearheading events or productions or whatever that artistically we put our heads together to do, that's for the betterment of our communities, for the betterment of our individual communities that we serve and the city as a whole. So that's what I am in my race looking for BIPOC to do with Dallas. We have the theater companies, when I say we, I'm talking about theater companies, we have to move with the times. Everybody's competing with this. And right now, the world, we're on this. And it's like, how do we get theater and what we do on stage into that device or this device that I'm speaking on now, and still move people, motivate people, inspire people to continue activisms, whether it's outside of the arts or within the arts. And so that takes resources, that takes funding, that takes city support. And we have to introduce theater to the next generation so that they don't have to necessarily go somewhere else to get the grassroots education in theater, that they had many avenues to get it right here in our city. And if we don't get the support, wonderful theaters like Cardona and Teatro Dallas and Bishop Arts, they're not going to be around to do those programs that are geared towards our next generation. So allow us to do what we do best, allow us to pay our artists beyond starvation fee, and to tell our kids that you started here in this theater program or this workshop with the various theater companies to learn. You had that memory engraved. We gave you great fundamental theater background. You went off to college, but hey, you know what? You don't have to stay in New York. You don't have to stay in Minneapolis or wherever to do quality theater. Guess what? You got a job waiting for you when you come home. That job can only exist if the city of Dallas supports us and makes sure we're here for the longevity.
What a way to close us out, Tanya. What a way to close us out. So you heard it here first. We need resources without all of your racist stipulations. All right, invest in these theater companies. They are doing amazing work in our communities. You know, on behalf of Dallas Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation, I want to thank Teresa, David, Sada, and Tanya for being with us. Dallas TRHT will continue these conversations, highlighting the ways race and racism affect every aspect of our lives and what we as a community can do to change it. Thank you all again for being with us, and you know, signing out. Thank you all so much.